Today we are going to talk about the advice surrounding consistency. A lot of people say just do it like you're brushing your teeth, and that advice made me feel broken for the longest time because I couldn't apply it to my life. You know what the problem with that is? Brushing your teeth is not metabolically expensive. Today I'm going to try to make sense of why that advice isn't bad by itself, but it is incomplete, particularly for certain people who have not had the best start in life. You are not broken if you have had an experience like this. Hi and welcome to another episode of Notes from a Desi Girl. Let's start with that brushing your teeth advice. You know what the problem with that is? Brushing your teeth is not metabolically expensive. You learned it as a kid, and at that time it was difficult for you, but you have since forgotten how difficult it was to learn it. Now you're cruising on maintenance. Now you're just doing it because you have reached that stage. You have reached what I like to call stage 2 of the work, where you don't have to think about it. And when you are in stage 2 of anything, then that kind of advice is applicable to you. That just do it can make sense. Even if you don't feel like it, you will go to the gym if you have built the habit. Now, gym is not exactly the greatest example because going to the gym is not always metabolically expensive either, the way doing something of your own creative work is. The stage 1, the starting stage for anyone, for a beginner who's trying to do something good with their life, like I have also been. I am still in some of the starting stages because my audience and the thing I've built is not that big. I have done enough work in the last 2 years where I now feel like it's not that bad for me to sit down and this current work of mine where I record into the camera loosely about a topic that I feel like I know enough about, or I intertwine my experiences in there to share what I have learned. That is something that used to be scary for me earlier and it used to terrify me. Now it's a little better. So I think I have crossed that hard initial stage, the first stage, and gone into stage 2. Now, the first stage, some people have alluded to it online, where they talk about the fact that starting something of your own is always hard. There's a lot of unknowns. No one's there to tell you what to do exactly. And even if someone tells you, just post your thoughts every day, what are your thoughts? That's on you, right? You have to decide that. So people talk about the stage 1 being an uphill battle. They talk about being in the depth of the J curves, like everything, learning anything is like a J curve. First you get worse and only then you get better. So that curve is true. The starting stage is true. However, as a South Asian woman, as an Indian woman who has been brought up in a household that was quite violent and who has been told all her life to not have thoughts and that you can't be weird, you can't be yourself, that does something to us and it kind of reduces us to a 2D version of ourselves. All of these factors combined with the fact that later in life you can also experience certain struggles from the system that you're living in. For me currently that's immigration limbo. All of these factors are designed to slow you down and to keep your voice curbed, like you aren't supposed to say the thing. And unless you are very thick skinned, which I am not, the fact about me is that I care and I care a lot and I don't think that's a weakness anymore. But caring a lot also means you care about these things that try to bring you down, at least at first. So all of these factors influence what stage 1 looks like for a lot of people, particularly brown people or anyone who's not white, who is from another part of the world where doing something creative is often laughed at, or where mainstream advice, the mainstream content out there isn't for people like us. Stage 1 looks different for people like us. I drew a little graph. I think it's been erased in a certain place. This is what stage 1 really looks like. And this is what stage 2 really looks like. So you see that graph of things sort of starting to stabilize a little bit. Stability in creative work is a little weird because creative work comes to you in flashes. Ideas come to you in flashes, and after a while you have a little bit of a rut or a mini burnout, as I used to call it earlier, but now I know it's a rut. That's creative work actually has a 24-hour cycle too. It's been documented. Some hours you feel like you're on top of the world, you have a lot of ideas, and after a while you feel stupid, like the critical voice in your mind wakes up and it tells you, who are you to make this content? So it's a cycle of that. For stage 1, however, this cycle is greatly exacerbated, and this is what my experience has been like. First things first, It took me a while to heal from my childhood and my culture. And when I started healing and when I started realizing that I too have a voice, I too can tell stories, and that's nice. That's a good way for me to document my life. What happened was this surge of ideas started coming to me. The y axis here is intensity of ideas, and the x axis here is time. I didn't write that down, but I should. Initially, when I got a lot of ideas, something happened. I realized that the society as a whole was stopping me, but there wasn't like one specific brick wall quite physically, which means it affected me. It was in my mind, but I could give myself permission and I could start. When I gave myself permission, I realized this backlog of ideas I had my entire childhood, where I notice things. I'm someone who notices things. I'm someone who connects seemingly unrelated things together and tries to make sense of them in a story or in these realizations that I've had. All of that started to flood in. There was no space for it. Like, I couldn't be contained. My ideas couldn't be contained. They just started flowing, as this graph shows, and the ideas reached a very high intensity and they came up to here. So the advice, a lot of generic advice says, identify your floor. What is the minimum thing that you could do today, and do that. For creative work, it is different because you are buzzed up. Like, forget coffee, it's like you were struck by lightning. You are buzzed up to that level, and these ideas aren't going to be contained by doing a little bit every day. I suddenly had 20 ideas a day, and sometimes I had 5, but they wouldn't stop for weeks. What I did, of course, is I wrote it down, because suddenly every single thing around me was an idea or an anecdote or a story. And I had to write this down because I haven't had permission to do it. I'm operating from the scarcity mindset here. Everything needs to be collected right now. Every single thought, every sentence someone said was an idea. I wanted to contain it, to not lose out on it. It's a different episode altogether on its own. So how am I supposed to slow down when I am like a snowball rolling down the hill, more and more keep coming? You cannot slow down in that stage. Now, this isn't meant to tell you shouldn't slow down or that you cannot slow down. This is meant to document my experience of what it was like for me. The reason a lot of people probably don't talk about stage 1 is because either they have since forgotten what it was like, or secondly, you can't really advise someone out of stage 1 necessarily. All you can tell them is, I felt stupid too, I felt lonely too, I felt lost too, and I was not consistent from day 1. I had a rocky start. That's all someone can tell you. If someone advises you to actually just go through with it inconsistently or something, that can be construed as bad advice. That could be taken out of context. There's liability there. So I am just telling you my experience with it to maybe make you feel not as lonely. So my ideas reached this pinnacle and I'm like, oh shit. And slowly, as it often does, I had a bit of a crash with the way ideas came, and I was in a bit of a rut. The way it happened for me was, for a few weeks these ideas came and I was so good at writing, I was so good at noticing things, I noted it down, but after a while, for a few months, nothing. Full dip. I was overwhelmed. I was not talking to friends because I wasn't doing much with it, right? I was in a rut, I couldn't do much. And so anything anyone would say, any dialogue anyone would say in a TV show would have triggered me and made me feel bad, because I am not secure enough with the fact that I'm not able to execute it. So this first rut lasted me months. What happened was, I wasn't doing much, but these ideas they had brewed in my mind and I had written them down, right, in my notes app. Hundreds of these ideas. So they were kind of open loops, they were sitting there and I felt bad about not executing them. I wanted to execute them and do justice to them. So I got another intensity rush after a few months. I got another point where more ideas came and seasons had changed by that time. So I started noticing other things. I started noticing these bunnies and lights, and these bunnies triggered more memories that I had in my childhood that I hadn't since accessed. And these kept coming again. And after a while, I again wrote them down. Every idea led to another idea. Sometimes I executed these ideas. In both these high intensity stages, I executed a bit and then I dipped. For some months, I didn't execute at all. But executing an idea gives you more. So I did that. And then again, I had a bit of a dip where I wasn't doing much. It was a rocky start, as you can say. However, The third time I have an intensity, I noticed something. And I've noticed it with two different things I've done. With vlogging, my cinematic vlogging channel, and this podcast channel. The third time I had a high intensity signal of ideas, it came a little faster than the second one. Which means the time here between these two ruts, or between this time here, reduced the more I lived life and the more I decided I want to do this. What kept happening was, in consistency advice is like, just do it, just keep going. For me, I had to think of it the other way. Stage one for me was not just keep going. Stage one for me was, did I return to it despite everything that happened to me? And how soon did I return to it? Earlier, it took me 3 to 4 months to return to it because I couldn't bear not doing the thing that I had started. Then, it took me 1 month to return to it, and 1 month again and again, like the third and the fourth intensity peaks that I had. Then, it took me a few weeks to return to it, like 2 weeks. Then, those 2 weeks turned into 1 week, and so on, until I started returning to it faster. This was a long process. For me, for my vlogging channel, it took me 1 year. I was in stage 1 for 1 year with my cinematic vlogging. But after a while, because a lot of ideas started coming, I started a podcast and I noticed this exact same thing happen. However, because I had already had that and the give yourself permission when the dam breaks thing had happened to me with vlogging already, with podcast it happened. That was significantly smaller than my vlogging work that I'm doing here, podcasts plus Substack. I was in stage 1 for 6 months. The same pattern is true for both. And what I have noticed is I was able to get to stage 2. Now I see in hindsight that, I've done a little bit, more or less, every day or a few times a week, and that counts. Now I have enough of a body of work that just from me looking back at it, I feel like, nice, I did something, and this is collectible, all of these little grains of sand that I did. In my beach of life, my beach of life will be fill if every day I do a little bit, and that little bit is a grain of sand. This insight I only had in hindsight, in retrospect. That is the point. You only realize the consistency advice, which again has merit, works for you when you are in stage 2. It only works for you, or you hit that realization in hindsight. When you are in stage 1, it doesn't matter what hundreds of people are telling you. Stage 1 is significantly different than stage 2, particularly for anxious people who have been suppressed, who have been silenced all their life. People online, I don't know what to do, right? So I'm going online, I'm trying to look for advice, and everyone's like, just do it. Just every day, just do it. No! I want to do 20 things every day, and then I want to do nothing for 20 days. That's just how it is. Just to give you an example, right now in my notes app, I have 350 ideas. In the last 6 months, this is how many ideas I have gotten. Now, I realize that not every single idea is a story, and that's a different conversation altogether. But I have 350 ideas. And the more I keep going, the more I get these ideas. But in the initial stages, in like absolute beginning of stage 1, one thought led to 5 more, and 5 thoughts each could lead to 3 more. Now I am a bit more secure in stage 2. So one thought leads to 2 other. But it ends there. I have now started trusting myself that not every little thing or every little grain of dust that I see there has to be made into a story. That has only come to me in hindsight, which means if someone has had a rocky start, and if you're anxious, and if you've found that something very weird happened with your intensity of ideas, like an avalanche, once you gave yourself permission, you will reach stage 2. And again, you can tell that there's liability in giving someone advice like, just do it, like go on stage 1 and just, go all in, and then you will have a bit of a rut, just go all in. That's bad advice if you say it like that, and out of context, people can take it at face value, so you have to be really careful. And maybe people don't talk about, I never heard someone talk about this. There could be 2 reasons actually. First is survivorship bias. A lot of people, you only see their content after they've made it for years. So the initial parts where maybe they told the truth about what they were feeling don't reach you, only the later stages of their work reach you. And the later stages, they're cruising on maintenance, right? So you can that's the advice, or that's the topic that they would talk about. The initial one never reaches you, so maybe this wouldn't reach anyone. Don't know. And secondly, a lot of the people in my experience who've made content, and they're brilliant creators, they're really good at talking, they're so charismatic, but the things that they had gone through weren't similar to what I had gone through. They didn't have the kind of baggage, the cultural, the emotional baggage that I have. So they didn't have a lot of things bringing them down initially for it to spike later into this equal and opposite force, for them to feel stage one as intensely as I do. That it could be a second reason. And that is why I don't want to leave it and just not talk about this. I have to tell my truth. Right? And my truth is that the very rocky start I had, this stage one, is not something that made me broken. It just means that despite what happened, despite the fallow periods, despite certain stages where I had to do more immigration paperwork and that took more of my time, or maybe I was sick or something like that, I still returned to it. If you feel lost and if you want to do good work, if you keep returning to it, I think you are in a good place no matter what happens. So this is where I'll end today. And look at this graph again. You are not broken if you have had an experience like this. Again, you will get to stage 2. The most chaotic person in the world, me, got to stage 2 where I now am starting to understand the concept of discipline and consistency very slowly, in retrospect. If the most chaotic person in the world can understand that, you can do anything. So that's where I'll end my thoughts for today, because my husband wants to cook in the kitchen and he's waiting. See you next time. Bye.